My name is Richard Mason. I'm with the House of Hope in Columbus, Ohio. And today we're going to be discussing handling concerns from neighbors and residents. All right. This morning, our learning objectives are: we want to identify strategies that can be used to prevent concerns from neighbors and other community members. We want to describe how any concerns from neighbors can be appropriately handled. And we want to identify strategies that can be used to prevent concerns from residents. And develop skills for handling potential resident concerns, including strategies for encouraging residents to solve minor concerns amongst themselves, strategies for addressing larger concerns using a formal grievance process, and we want to discuss strategies for documenting concerns and grievances that are received for quality improvement. So a little bit about House of Hope. House of Hope has been offering treatment services since 1959 to Franklin County residents. We have a 6-month residential treatment program for men. We have outpatient treatment services for men and women. And we have a level 3 recovery residence. Stevens House is our 6-month Vivitrol program for men. And our level 2 recovery residences, we have 7 scattered sites with a total of 35 beds. House of Hope opened its first recovery residence in September 2008. This building that we had was originally for an adolescent program, and it was just not a great space for the adolescents that kept running away, and we can't bill for residents that run away. So they discontinued that program, and then what are we going to do with this building? And our CEO, Carolyn Ireland, at the time decided that why don't we make it well, back then, we called it a sober house. But that was our first recovery residence. It had 12 beds, had a nice kitchen facility. It was a great fit for recovery housing. The 12-bed facility in the south side of Columbus is now a level 3 recovery residence for men utilizing Vivitrol to start their recovery. In August 2011, we purchased a 5-bedroom house next door and established that as our senior house. So Highland House, which we bought in April 2013, was the beginning of OMAS supporting recovery housing in the state of Ohio. And about this time is when we started getting organized at Ohio Recovery Housing. I'm a founding member, and I'm currently serving on the board. And Adam H., Franklin County, and OMAS, they were kind of watching what we were doing with our recovery residents. Our first recovery residence that I showed you on Parsons, and then the one next door. And they came to us and said, look, we want to give you some funding to open some more recovery residences. And so we were the first agency in the state of Ohio to receive capital funds from, it was a 50-50 match, 50% match with our Adam H. board here in Franklin County and OMAS. And with those funds, they gave us $600,000. And with those funds, we opened up 2 recovery residences. And this was the first. This was Highland House. And so this was all new to us, definitely new to the city of Columbus and kind of new to the state of Ohio, even though there's been some informal, sober houses throughout the state. But this was the period where we started getting organized in the state of Ohio. And so once we purchased the property and we were ready to sort of take in residents, there's some things that we had to do. And this house is located in Victorian Village, which is a very expensive upscale part of Columbus. One of the things about the capital funding that we got from the state and our Adam H. board was that they wanted the houses to be in good neighborhoods, so that it's a great environment for our residents to get sober and pursue their recovery. And so they funded us adequately so that we could buy homes in nice neighborhoods and buy nice homes. And so I'm really grateful for that. And so one of the things we had to do was I didn't know what I was doing at the time. And so I went to get some help from some other people in the community who have kind of done this before. And it was mainly from a mental health housing perspective. And I was sort of translating that into recovery housing. And one of the suggestions, we had to kind of notify the neighborhood associations, and we had to notify our neighbors. And so one of the most important parts that I want to convey today is that as you're venturing into opening up recovery housing, you want to make sure that you are in control of the messaging around your housing. Because if you lose that control and somebody else takes that control, like concerned neighbors or a neighborhood association group that wants to prevent you from, operating your home in that neighborhood, is very difficult if you're behind the 8 ball on that. And so what we're going to be discussing now is the steps you should take so that you're putting the message out there and you're in control of the message. And when you do it that way, it's going to minimize any type of problems you're going to have. And so let me sort of give you an example of what that looked like when we opened up Highland House. So we came up with a document called Facts About Our Plans for 1212 Highland Avenue. And we distributed this to Victorian Village Commission, the Short North Business Association, and we sent it to our surrounding neighbors, about 150 neighbors in the surrounding area from the house. And this is what we sent out. What are our plans? House of Hope plans to develop a new sober housing unit at 1212 Highland Avenue, a half a block south of 5th Avenue, Victorian Village. The building will provide housing for 5 individuals in recovery from drugs and alcohol addiction, including an on-site resident manager. House of Hope will manage the property and coordinate with community providers for resident services. House of Hope, Inc. provides alcohol and other drug treatment services to those who are most in need so that they may maximize their potential, become productive members of society, and enjoy those gifts of life that are available in sobriety. House of Hope has had facilities in Victorian Village since 1959. So just a side note, so our residential treatment program is also in this neighborhood. So we've been in this neighborhood for decades. And so we had a good relationship with the Victorian Village Commission and the Short North Business Association and our neighbors. Based on data collected from client surveys using the Addiction Severity Index and reported to the Franklin County Adam H. Board for Quality Improvement Reporting from October 2009 to November 2010, the House of Hope provided outpatient and long-term residential alcohol and drug treatment to 343 individuals, 20% women and 77% men. At the conclusion of their treatment, 89 reported a decrease in problems and or impairment from substance use. In addition, 87% of those served reported that they had experienced a decrease in psychological distress. 84 reported an increase in functioning and quality of life. The House of Hope is certified by the Ohio Department of Alcohol and Drug Addiction Services. The staff providing services is caring and experienced in the field of chemical dependency. All clinicians are licensed by the state of Ohio. The House of Hope is funded by the Franklin County Adam H. Board, the Ohio Department of Alcohol and Drug Addiction Services, and Franklin County Department of Jobs and Family Services, and generous private donors. Client payment is based on the sliding fee scale. Most of our clients qualify for no or reduced charges for our services. Abstinence-based recovery. Abstinence is the primary treatment goal for any client receiving services at all of House of Hope programs. Abstinence means total avoidance of drinking alcohol, using illicit drugs, and/or prescription drugs illicitly. Prescription drugs prescribed by a physician and used under a physician's care are exceptions. What is sober housing? Sober housing facilities are used by addicts and alcoholics recovering from substance abuse, which served as an interim environment between rehab and return to their former lives. Sober housing grew out of a need to have safe and supportive place for people to live while they were in recovery. They are primarily meant to provide housing for people who have just come out of rehab or recovery centers and need a place to live that is structured and supporting for those in recovery. However, it is not necessary to come from rehab. How will the house be managed? Highland House accepts individuals with drug or alcohol dependencies who are clean and sober, at least 18 years of age, not a danger to themselves or to others, and can take care of themselves. Prospective clients must be involved in a 12-step program of their choice and be active in their recovery with a minimum of 30 days of continuous sobriety. Highland House will not deny membership to anyone on basis of age, race, ethnic background, national origin, creed, religion, religious affiliation, marital status, or sexual orientation. Highland House members are required to maintain their admission requirements throughout their stay and to submit to random drug testing and adhere to Highland House rules. Highland House members who have been terminated may reapply after 30 days and be treated as a new resident. Our residents must be medically and psychologically stable. They must be at least 18 years of age, must be able to take care of themselves fully on a daily basis, must be willing to follow a 12-step program, must be employed prior to taking residence, must be able to pay $380 a month or $95 a week for rent for a single room. To be admitted to Highland House, applicants fill out an application form and are interviewed by existing residents. 80% or more of the current house members must vote in favor of the applicant's admission to the house for the application to be accepted. Length of stay. There is no maximum length of stay. However, the residents in the program are designed to be transitional and to afford the residents sufficient time and resources with which to establish independent, healthy living arrangements. Program setting. Highland House Residence is a 5-bedroom duplex serving male residents. Each resident has his own bedroom and shares 2 bathrooms. Common areas include a kitchen with dining, living room, laundry, and utility area. Comfortable furniture, television, and all the amenities associated with home living are included. Meals are the responsibility of each resident, with cooking appliances, utensils, and dishwasher provided. Mutual responsibility for the care of the residents is expected and enforced. The residents offer easy access to several bus lines in the North High Street, 5th Avenue area, and the Short North area of Columbus, Ohio. Residencies component. The sober residence is designed as a traditional housing program for adult males age 18 or older in early recovery that may have unstable living environments that might make going home unadvisable. Although the sober living residents are not a treatment program, residents will have a continuing care plan, including minimum of 4 12-step meetings a week, having a 12-step sponsor, weekly attendance at house meetings, must maintain full-time employment, Residents on disability must participate in 20 hours of a week of work, volunteer service, or participation in school or vocational training. Will this change the safety of my neighborhood? House of Hope Maine carefully screens and select tenants who can benefit from the supportive services and live successfully in the community. Most tenants will have successfully completed 4 to 6 months of residential treatment prior to securing residency at our 1320 Parsons location. Highland House will only house senior members from our sober housing network. Tenants must be good neighbors and are subject to eviction for behaviors that violates the term of their leases. Tenants must pay rent, respect their neighbors, and maintain their housing just like any other resident in the community. House of Hope has facilities in Victorian Village since 1959 and has a proven record of maintaining a good neighbor presence in the community. Since 2008, our sober housing units on Parson Avenues have also played a role in being a vital and vibrant neighbor in the community. Why was this location chosen for sober housing? This property location offers many services and amenities. Bus service connects the location to all parts of the city. Highland House is also within walking distance to a variety of retail services, our main offices on 825 Denison. The area also offers abundant employment opportunities. So this is the video we came up at the time.
Hey, Richard,
Yes.
I can't hear the audio of the video.
You can't hear the audio?
Yeah, I can't hear it. I don't know. If people can send in chat. Can you hear the audio, the video? Yeah, some people are saying they can't hear it either.
Oh, right.
We'll move on.
All right, so yes, we're going to move on. We will send you a link to this video. This video was created by Ohio Recovery Housing to help with any neighbor concerns. And the video is also available for you to use if you're having any issues or if you're sort of being proactive and are presenting to neighbors or neighborhood associations. It really gives a good view about what recovery housing is really about. And so we will send you the link. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties with that. Just as a note of the document that we just went over, that document was done in 2013. It was in the early days. And so some of the terminology is kind of antiquated for today. But I wanted to show that document in its original. I didn't want to update the document of what we sent out. But terms like sober housing, we don't use those terms anymore. We use the term recovery housing because recovery is planned for and expected and supported. And it's not just a sober house. And so we make that distinction. And the other part of that makes that distinction is ORH's quality standards that members have to meet. And so that's why we use the term recovery housing. So moving forward, we end up getting funding to buy a total of 7 recovery residences. And Koebel House is the last house that we purchased. And then that was also with capital funds with a match from our Adam H. Board here in Franklin County and OMAS. And by this time, it was a 25-75 match. So 25% of it was given by our Adam H. Board, and the other 75% was given by the state. So Koebel House is more of a suburban setting than an urban setting that all of our other residences, but it's still pretty urban. This house is located maybe a mile south of Maryhaven here in Columbus, if you know where that is, on the southeast side. So let's talk about our good neighbor policies. One moment. So according with House of Hope's Good Neighbor policy, all members of the residence, including visitors and guests, are required to do the following while living, working, or visiting a House of Hope Recovery resident. I'm sorry, here we go. I'm having trouble here for a second, I'm sorry. All right, so back to our good neighbor policy. A, only have one vehicle parked on the street within a 4-block radius of the resident. Now this is important, and it's funny, we didn't really anticipate this problem until we were up and running at several locations. And you know, we have to be conscious about our neighbors. And so in our recovery residence, it's, you know, 5 individuals. So there could be 5 cars. And that could pose a parking issue with our neighbors, especially if we're new to the neighborhood. And so we want to make sure that we're not taking up more space than we need to. And the problem came up was one of my residents bought a second car. Now, I thought that was a little odd that somebody felt like they needed to have 2 cars and then have them both parked, you know, on the street in the neighborhood. And you know, we talked about it. We're like, we never anticipated this problem, but we ended up going to the resident and we said to the resident, look, you can only have 1 car parked here during your stay here, but we're not sure why you have the need for a second car here. Why are you living in our recovery residence? And we feel that if you can afford 2 cars, it's probably time for you to get your own place. And so we gave them an ultimatum. It's like, either get rid of the second car or it's time for you to, you know, to transition out, and we'll help you make their transition. But, you know, if you can afford a second car, you're doing pretty well. And so that's where that policy came out about the vehicles. You know, when we're buying a property, we're looking at parking, how much on-site parking there is at the residence, and how much street parking that we would have to do. You know, our house in Victorian Village, you know, it's permit parking, and you're only allowed 2 permits. And so we have to really take that into consideration when we're bringing somebody into the house about if they have a car or not. And so we have some homes that are more conducive to having, you know, everybody having a car, and we try to place people in those locations so that we're not a burden on the neighbors. On B, always be fully clothed without smoking, relaxing on the porch, front and back, working or playing in the yard. White beaters, tank tops, or sleeveless shirts are not permitted. Loud music blasting from your car or the residence is strictly forbidden. Outside the residence must always be maintained. Residents must shovel the snow for our neighbors to the left and right of the residence, along with a light dusting of rock salt. Homemade holiday cookies are delivered to our neighbors during the holiday season. Compliance with the Good Neighbor policy is a condition of your tenancy at House of Hope Recovery Residences. NAR, the National Association of Recovery Residences, has a great white paper on NIMBY issues, and I highly encourage you to take a look at this document. I think there's a link to it, or we will email you a link to this document, but this is a great source for you, especially if you're facing some serious NIMBY issues. NIMBY, not in my backyard. The American Planning Association Policy Guide on Community Residences, 1997, reviewed more than 50 studies and concluded that community residences, such as group homes and halfway houses, do not have an effect on the value of neighboring properties. And so if you're having opposition for you to open up a recovery residence in a neighborhood, that's usually the first complaint that they're going to make, is they're going to say, if you open up in our neighborhood, it's going to diminish our property values. And that is not the case. As a fact, especially in our Victorian Village neighborhood, our neighbors on both sides, one of our neighbors is in a video that I was trying to show earlier, and our other neighbor, she sold her house. She was a professor at Ohio State. She sold her house and then gave us a letter about, what she was able to get from selling her house, and that our house next door had no impact on her selling price. And so this sort of addresses that. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about, but that's usually the number one argument that they make why they don't want a recovery residence in their neighborhood. Reviews also note that community residences are often the best maintained homes in their block, and that many neighbors were not even aware that such a residence in the neighborhood. Also see Council of Planning Librarians, 1990. Other reviews have found no negative effects on neighborhood safety, and that residents of group homes are much less likely to commit a crime of any sort than the average resident. Despite these reasons and federal law protecting persons in recovery as a protected class under the Federal Fair Housing Act and its amendments, recovery of residences often face significant not in my backyard NIMBY opposition to opening in residential neighborhoods, or may be forced to open in poorer ones. And so one of the things about our residences, each resident is only, except for our Stevens house, which is our level 3, which is 12 beds. All of our residents are 5 beds. All of our level 2 recovery residences are just 5 beds. And part of that's all that the city of Columbus allowed us to do. They allow us to have 5 non-related adults, living in a residence. And if it's 5 non-related adults, we don't have to have any special variants, any special permissions. And the big thing is we don't have to have a fire suppression. And so what happens when you go over 5 residents, this varies from different cities around and different counties around the state. You'll have to check your own local rules, housing rules, or building codes. But generally speaking, if you just have 5 residents, you don't have to do anything extraordinary. It's recognized as just another resident. And so that is protected by fair housing. And so even if our neighbors did not want us there, they have no choice, because our residences are protected under fair housing rules. Now, our Stevens house, which was originally the adolescent program that we turned into a recovery residence, which is now a level 3 recovery residence. So a level 3 residence means that they have housing and they're doing treatment offsite. Now, that's more than 5. And so we had to get, and we already had a rooming house permit, and we also had to have fire suppression. And the fire suppression is hardwired into the unit and hardwired directly to the fire department. And so these were things that we had to do to have more than 5 people in a residence. And that can be costly, especially if you're just starting out. And so those are things you can consider and look at when you're developing your plan for your housing, or plan for if you're going to have more 5, 6, or even more 8 to 12. You're going to have to take it to the next level and get building permits or occupancy permits. And so you want to make sure that you're compliant with your local rules so that they don't come after you because they have the potential of doing that, or the neighbors might use that against you. For example, a study conducted in Philadelphia found that over 50% of recovery residences in that city were located within only 4 of the 49 city zip codes, and that 26 zip codes did not have any recovery homes in them whatsoever. This sort of opposition is unfortunate because research conducted to date generally finds that recovery residences do not negatively affect neighborhoods and may even provide benefits to the communities in which they are located. And so all of our neighbors that are next to all of our residences, I get letters of support from them. The reason why I get those letters of support is in case there is a complaint, I can show these letters, or sometimes I have gone to help other groups who are having serious NIMBY issues, serious opposition, and I would come and present. And, if you're having some serious NIMBY issues and a lot of heavy opposition, send me an email. I'm willing to assist you and come and maybe speak to the group and sort of help alleviate their fears. When we moved into the last house, the Koebel house, we had opposition. It was mainly one neighbor who opposed, but I had to go speak to the neighborhood association. But once I did, all but the one neighbor were supportive, very supportive. The one neighbor was very difficult. To give you a story about a difficult neighbor, it was Christmas Day. And I don't know how she got my cell number, but she called me up and she was so upset because the guys across the street, the garage door was open. And if the garage door is open, that's going to attract thieves. And I said to her, listen, if any of the other neighbors on the street had the garage door open on Christmas Day, would you have contacted them? And she said, no. And I said, well, you need to give my residents the same respect you're giving everybody else in the neighborhood. And, even though she was across the street, we shoveled her driveway. We gave her cookies at Christmas and did all the things that we do with our good neighbor policy. And today, she's one of our biggest supporters. It's been a complete turnaround. So good neighbor policies go a long way, especially when you're having someone. A lot of times it's just education, and when you educate the neighbors, they have a good understanding. The stigma of people in recovery is changing as well because it's touched so many lives. So when I was at that neighborhood association meeting and talking about it, afterwards, I would say 3 or 4 neighbors came up to me and said, look, I have somebody, a loved one who's in recovery, and I love, what you guys are doing is a good thing. So there's a lot of support out there for you. ORH is here to help you, and also myself as an individual. If you're having some serious NIMBY issues, feel free to reach out to me. Interviewing landlords of Oxford houses, they found that landlords reported that things such as excessive noise, rent payment, landlord-tenant communication, and prep problems was less of a problem with Oxford house renters than with other renters. And many had positive comments about renting to Oxford house tenants. Studies of neighbors and community neighbors have found similarly encouraging findings. In interviews with neighbors of Oxford houses, Jason Roberts and Olson, 2005, found Oxford house residents blended well into the neighborhoods and made good neighbors. They also found that the majority of Oxford house neighbors interviewed had either gained resources, friendships, or a greater sense of security following contact with the Oxford house residents. And I want to make a note, with my NMH board here in Franklin County, when we were first talking about recovery housing, and it was new to them, there was a staff member there who previously had lived next door to an Oxford house. And, he had that experience where the Oxford houses they were the best neighbors. And so that kind of gave us a great introduction to recovery housing at our local LMH board. Furthermore, they found no evidence of property devaluation in the neighborhoods containing Oxford houses. Community members who knew of the Oxford house actually saw an increase in property values over an average of 3 years. So now we want to get into, how to manage your house so that it is a healthy place for your residents and being the best house in the blocks for your neighbors. And so I'm going to go over some of our policies and rules that we have that we think facilitates that. So residents must be clean and sober for at least 30 days. Any use of drugs and alcohol will result in immediate referral from the residents to detox or to a higher level of care. And so in a level 2 residence, right, you want to have residents there that are stable. And the way ours is structured is that we have 5 residents in a house, and one of those residents has been elevated to the position of house manager. So we don't have any staff on site, but we do have a live-in house manager. And it's important that everybody that's in the house is stable. They've had some treatment, and this is for a level 2 recovery resident. You want to make sure that they're stable. If you're putting people who are unstable in a level 2 resident with minimum, staff or agency oversight, it's going to be a crack house and before you know it. And so ORH has a tool that you could use for you to determine the level of care required for the population you want to serve. And if you go through that tool, go through that survey, and talk about how you want to structure your house, it will tell you what level of housing that's appropriate. So we have a level 3 recovery residence, and we have 24-hour staff at the level 3 recovery residence. And we have 24-hour staff there because these are people coming straight from the streets or from jail. They've had no treatment, they're not stable. And so we have higher staffing levels for that to serve that population. And basically what happens in our program is you step down from your level 3 after you finish your treatment, you step down to the level 2. And so it's really important. So that's why we have this rule about, being sober for 30 days. Now, recently we have since reduced it to 2 weeks instead of 30 days. The landscape is changing, but we're also finding that we don't really need 30 days to stabilize somebody who's already been in the house, who've already gone through treatment, right? They need a more brief stabilization. But being stabilized is is pertinent to maintain the integrity of the house. Okay. And so what happens at our house, if somebody relapses, we immediately get them into detox. Now we're fortunate here in Franklin County that we can, we have partners, detox facilities. Mary Haven is our main partner. We have partners that we can call and find them a bed pretty quick in detox and get them stabilized. We help our residents get employment, and so I will help them maintain their employment, or if not, if they lose their employment, we'll help them get new employment. It gets them stable. We hold the bed the whole time, and then once they're stable, we bring them back to the house. And so, but we hold the bed for them. And we found this policy, this is our relapse policy, to be very successful. The guys come back, and most of the time when they come back for a relapse, they have a new energy towards their recovery, a new seriousness, and they tend to do very well. Residents must attend 4 12-step meetings a week and be working with a sponsor. We have a curfew, so residents must be in by 11 p.m. Sunday through Thursday and 12 a.m. on Friday and Saturday. And we do not allow overnight guests. Residents are allowed several overnights a week, but must be approved in advance. And so our structure is just that really any requests that any of our residents make that might be outside of the rules are usually okayed. We just want the planning to happen. We want to plan for it. If you're going to go on vacation, or for example, if our guys go on vacation, we help them already seek out the 12-step meetings of where they're going to be on vacation so that they can hit a meeting or two while they're on vacation. We want to set that up before they head out. And so really, any reasonable request is going to be approved if it's planned in advance. And so with our overnights, you're allowed 2 overnights a week. Sometimes they'll have a standing order. They may go back home to their family for the weekend, or they have a significant other that they want to be with for the weekend. And so we know that, okay, on Saturday and Sunday, they're going to be at this location. And so they can have a standing order that way. What we don't want is somebody calling up at 11 o'clock saying, hey, I need to miss curfew. And we're like, no, you need to get your butt home. So if it's planned in advance, it's pretty much okay. But this last minute stuff, no, we don't play that. Weekly house meetings and attendance is mandatory. The weekly house meetings are very important. This is where the residents pay their rent and issues are addressed. Especially, we train our house managers and the other residents about relapse prevention. Usually before somebody relapses, there are red flags before they actually pick up. And so that's where that stuff can be addressed in a house meeting. They have to, let everybody know what meetings they went to. And it's just accountability. And that's the main recipe for success with a recovery resident, is accountability. Accountability from us, the agency, accountability from the other residents, and accountability from the house manager, and accountability to the rules is where we find to give people the support they need to be successful in their recovery. All residents will be assigned a weekly chore. So the residents are in charge of maintaining the properties. And everybody's assigned a chore, it's checked, and it's required. And quite frankly, the guys do a very good job of maintaining the properties and keeping the house clean and the landscaping and everything. But that is their responsibility. You can be tested for alcohol and or drugs at any time. Generally speaking, we test at the house meetings at least twice a month. And then we usually do one random testing somewhere, during that course of the month. So almost everyone is tested about 3 times a month, more if we deem necessary. Physical or verbal threats are grounds for immediate expulsion from the property. So this is the format of our weekly house meeting, and it's facilitated by the house manager. And so at the house meeting, there's a check-in, and they have everybody check in physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And then they talk about how their week was, and then what is their goal for next week. And then what 12-step literature are you reading? Share that with the group. You want to share something that stood out for you. You want to share an affirmation with the group. What service commitment do you have at your home group? Did you meet with your sponsor in person? What step are you working on? What meetings did you attend? And this is for new residents. So every resident that comes in has to have a recovery plan or relapse prevention plan. There are different sort of names for this. It's also a requirement with ORH's quality standards. And so they come into the house, they have this plan, and they share that plan with the other residents so that there's accountability. You said you were going to do this, but you're not doing this. And so there's accountability for that. For those who are on disability, have you completed your 20 hours of volunteer work? Have you completed your chore? And then, do you have any concerns regarding another member of the residence? And finally, do you have any positive feedback regarding other members of this resident? So that's the format of our weekly house meeting. So I'm going to go over now some of our best practices that really helps keep the peace in the house. But more importantly, it really helps people achieve long-term recovery. So an on-site resident house manager is essential. It's essential. When I hear about a recovery residence that's failing, meaning people are using on-site, it's unsafe, it always comes down to that there's no oversight. There was one agency that had some recovery residences, and they were using on site, including the house manager was using on site. There was a lot of chaos. And then, when I asked the owner, their structure, there was no oversight. And so they were just kind of left to their own devices. And that's a recipe for disaster. The weekly house meetings, we think, are very, very, very essential. Random drug testing and alcohol breathalyzing, very important. Having an employment volunteer education requirement, unstructured time is very detrimental to someone in early recovery. And so everybody has to have a full-time job to live in our residences. And if they happen to be retired or on disability, they still need to do 20 hours of volunteer work. We just think that's very important, that their time is structured. All of our house managers are certified peer recovery coaches. This just makes our house managers more effective in managing the house. Now, ORH also has a program that's specific for house manager training, and that's another alternative that you can check into. You need to have a clearly defined policy on relapse. The guys, I believe the residents have to have some skin in the game. And so collection of rent or program fees promotes self-sufficiency, and it makes your place sustainable. Access to supported employment services are very important. helping our guys get employment when they're transitioning from treatment to our level 2 recovery residents. But also, while they're in the residence, we want to work with them to help upgrade their employment or continue removing any barriers or help them go back to school. But that's an essential recovery support, we think, that will help our residents prosper. And then having funding for wraparound services. So we have very robust funding from our Adam H. Board of Franklin County of wraparound funding services. So we're able to buy bus passes so the guys can get to work, or gas cards if they have a car. I might, sometimes they may have a valid license, they may not. We might need to help them, get their driving privileges back. Now, we can't pay fines, but we can pay things like to get a license, to get their registration. We even may support them in doing their first month deposit for their insurance, for their car insurance. We buy work clothes, tools. It's a really broad area of funding available to our guys to help support them to rebuild their lives and get back on their feet. So the social model recovery. And so the whole idea of recovery residences is really founded on the social model of recovery. That's what makes it successful. So we're going to talk about that. The social model approach developed in California offers useful suggestions for facilitating peer support in residential recovery settings. Key principles include using 12-step or other mutual help group strategies to create and facilitate a recovery environment, involving program participants in decision-making and facility governance, using personal recovery experience as a way to help others, and emphasizing recovery as an interaction between the individual and their environment. Developing and maintaining a social model environment cannot be a function of the leadership alone. Residents must play a central role in helping each other understand household operation and dynamics from a social model perspective, and translate that into translate that understanding into action. And so, what that looks like. So I oversee all of our recovery residences here at House of Hope, and but again, each house has a house manager and 4 other residents. They have their house meetings, and so very rarely does an issue get to me. Most of the issues are usually solved at that house meeting, or by the house manager or by other residents, and it's done in a supportive way. And so very rarely does it that I have to intervene on something happening, something negative happening at the house. It's very rare. And that's because we really encourage our residents to support each other and to hold each other accountable. And that's the whole premise of the social model of recovery. Most residents will have had experience with 12 steps or other mutual help group programs and can draw on recovery principles used in those programs as a guide. Like 12-step programs, there's an informal oral tradition process that occurs with residents who are more experienced with social model programs, sometimes called senior peers, pass their knowledge on to the new residents. The leadership in the program needs to consistently emphasize and reinforce these processes. As new residents observe how issues in a household are understood and addressed, they sharpen their social model skills. As they learn more, they are empowered to contribute more to the welfare of the household and the individuals who live there. I have to tell you, our problem isn't relapse. Our problem isn't a lot of turnover. Our problem is our residents don't want to leave. And, again, there are no term limits, but when we see that somebody is prospering and stable, I have a resident right now who has been sober 3 years. He just got a wonderful job making $75,000 a year. And, it's really time for him to transition on to open up that bed for somebody who is new in recovery. But that's all thanks to the social model of recovery. First and foremost, we believe that people can and do get better, particularly if they're supported by peers who are effectively prepared to assist them in the process of setting their goals to achieve long-term recovery. And again, a lot of this happens in the weekly house meetings. We assist with developing and monitoring their plans for improvement over time. We create a home, family environment. All of us are peers who have lived experience with what our residents are experiencing and can offer support. And we talk as peers and we interact with our residents as peers, not patients. On-site resident house manager who leads by example creates the culture in the house. Excuse me. So if you're new, if you're newly getting into this, you're thinking about opening up a recovery home. Who you put in that position as house manager is vital, because they're going to set the tone, and they're going to, when I'm training my house managers, I'm like, I want you to lead by example. You can't be telling people to keep the kitchen clean if you're the one making the mess. And so choosing your house manager, and then once you're up and running, I'm always looking out for house manager material. My house managers do prosper and they move on. And so I'm always training, some new people to replace those house managers that I've had for some time. And they'll naturally sort of emerge for you. If you don't have a resource, to pull from, looking into the 12-step community for people who might want to come be a house manager for your recovery residents, it's a good resource as well. But again, the on-site resident house manager leads by example, and they create the culture of the house. They really sort of facilitate that social model of recovery. Residents' recovery is expected and planned for. All residents must complete a recovery plan at the beginning of their stay. Now, for us, while they're in treatment, when they're transitioning from treatment to one of our recovery residences, they do that. That's the last thing they do in treatment, is come up with their recovery plans. But when we bring people from the outside that didn't go through treatment with us, our recovery support person will work with them in developing their recovery plan. And then that plan is shared at the house meeting. Supporting each other through accountability, being of maximum service to others, community and 12-step volunteerism, reaching back and mentor clients who are in the treatment phase of the recovery. And so it's very important for us that the guys in the recovery residents, most of whom have gone through our treatment program, are now reaching back and mentoring the guys that are in treatment now, taking them to meetings, and sometimes it might be sponsorship, but we definitely want them reaching back and giving back to the community. Having a clearly defined policy on relapse and help the residents to get back on the horse if they fall off. And practice 12-step principles in all aspects of their lives. And then we have recovery support case management. And so we have a recovery support program that's funded through our AdamH board. And we have somebody, which is pretty much a peer recovery supporter, who works with all the residents and helps them with facilitating, 12 steps and any barriers or problems that they may be facing. House of Hope's grievance policies and procedures. The House of Hope gives notice to all clients that there's a grievance process, that a grievance process exists. If any components of the client's rights have been violated, clients must submit their grievance in writing. Clients may be assisted by staff to file a complete or grievance. The grieving party must include date and approximate time of incident, description of incident, names of individuals involved in the incident. Grievance must be signed and dated by client or individual filing on behalf of the client. Client can submit grievance to any staff member. Staff members will ensure grievance is submitted to the client's right officer. If the participant does not wish to give the grievance to the program director, she can mail it any time to the client's rights officer to notify the client in writing within 3 days of receipt of the grievance. A resolution will be forthcoming within 21 days after the grievance is received. If a client does not wish to submit the grievance to House of Hope staff, client may mail grievance to any of the following: Franklin County Adam H. Board, Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, Ohio Recovery Housing, Ohio Legal Rights Service, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Ohio Civil Rights Commission, and that brings us to the end. So we're going to go now to questions.
Hey, Richard, I just wanted to point out to everybody that the PDF of the PowerPoint is in the handouts sections that everybody can download. And also the NAR white paper is now in the handout panel that you can download as well. And if you guys could, if you have any questions, please put it in the chat panel and we'll help you out. We got a question here in the question panel. I'll read it to you. Do you have experience with getting zoning changed or requests for conditional use permits to allow housing in an R1 zone?
So I don't know what an R1 zone is, so I can't speak specifically to an R1 zone.
Yeah, I think it's a primary residence, or it's a residential neighborhood.
Okay, so we're here in Columbus, my Adam H. Board. So first of all, let me say that the city of Columbus is very supportive. They've been very supportive as we started our efforts to have recovery residences throughout the city. But having that cap at 5, that's kind of low. There are some homes that, some families that have more than 5 people in their family. So we sort of question about why is that capped at 5? And so we have met with the city to try to get them to do one or two things. A, change that, or more importantly, to give recovery residences its own category. And so we've been working with the city on that. It's a very slow process. As of date, there's been no changes from that. I know other people in other areas of Ohio have asked for some reasonable accommodations. That's the term you want to use. And they've been granted those reasonable accommodations. But it's difficult because if they're not supporting what you're trying to do, right, they're using that to sort of stonewall you from executing your housing plan. And so no, it's a very difficult thing to do, to get zoning changed. I spent a weekend reading, the city of Columbus, building codes and zoning laws. And when I first started, they said it was only 3. I could only do 3 residents. But I'm like, no, I was able to cite, the code to the person telling me that it was 5. And so those codes are available. Those zoning codes are available to you. So you can educate yourself with that. But it is a process to get those changed.
And Richard, your homes are, I know the answer to this, but they are in a residential neighborhood.
Yes. They're not only in residential neighborhoods, they're in some of the best residential neighborhoods in Columbus. I know that fire suppression is a big issue. You know, when you have a house with 8, 10, 12 people, you know, a lot of the city codes or the building codes, require fire suppression, which can be very expensive. And so, yes, that can be a deterrent actually. But when you're asking for reasonable accommodations, you can cite that it's going to be a financial hardship for you to do that.
Okay, we're going to do a last call for any questions. Give it 1 minute.
Is my email anywhere handy?
I can send it out to the attendees.
Yes, if you could, he's going to send out my email, and feel free to email me if you have some questions that pop up later or during the process of you executing your housing plans. Feel free to reach out to me.
Yeah, and just another one. I think you already covered it, but you've never been. You've ever been? It's difficult to successfully change zoning, especially Columbus. That's where you're located. So
Yes.
yeah. Have
So
you ever
they,
been Have you ever been successful?
No, we're still in the process, but I think it's just moving at the speed of government. I guess that's the best way to put it. When we met with the city, there was no opposition. They were very supportive. We've had a couple of complaints. Well, one particular directly to the city of Columbus about one of our recovery residences and how they opposed it. And the city was very supportive and in a very nice way to sort of said, no, they're allowed to be in your neighborhood and we support that. And they sort of shared that with us. So the city has been very supportive. But yes, the whole process of changing zoning, it's government. It's government. It's a process. But we're still working on it. We want them to raise that number from 5, up to 8. And because that makes it more cost effective for the housing.
And just to point out, I did put your email address in the chat section, everybody. So Richard is here for you. I have another question. I think, let's see. Nope, someone's